Okay. Okay. Hey guys. Hey. Hi. Just want to say hi.
I can't say too much as yet, but I'm going to be spending a lot more time in here with you lot, because I love it in here. I fucking love it!
That tells me it's true. I just don't have my fingers around it all the way. This is where I get fulfillment. Craft is where I impact the world. Let me set the stage. I'm a computer science professor who also does a lot of writing about technology and the way it intersects with all parts of our lives, our work, our life outside of work, the way we connect with each other. In this role, I do a lot of writing as a contributor to The New Yorker, where I really explore those ideas in depth in addition to my books. I'm often thinking about this. How do we work with technology? I have a philosophy. This is actually new since the last time I was on your show. I did a New Yorker piece in late 2023 where I introduced this notion I called techno-selectionism.
Who's in charge here?
Claw is our master. Claw chooses who will go and who will stay.
This is ludicrous.
And I said, this is really the way we should think about dealing with technologies in our life, but also in our organizations and our culture. So at multiple scales, is it's hard to predict in advance always the impact a new tool is going to have. I always give the example of going back and watching Steve Jobs' keynote speech in 2007 when he's introducing the iPhone. He doesn't even get to the internet features until 30 minutes into the speech. I mean, he was just jazzed that your iPod was going to be on the same thing as your phone and you wouldn't have to switch back and forth. He had no way of predicting 8 years later, you're going to have, for example, a teenage mental health crisis. So techno-selectionism says, be willing to actually aggressively step backwards. Like, be willing to say, this looks interesting. Let me try this out. Oh, no, this is not matching what's really important to me. So you're out of here. All right, this I will do, this I won't. So being more willing to both experiment and reject after the fact, to move away from these narratives of techno-progressivism that says new technology is good and there are bumps along the way, but you can't put this genie back in the box. And I say we can build all sorts of new boxes. And that's probably the right way to go forward. The new book, the Slow Productivity book, because one of the principles is obsess over quality. And if anything, that becomes the core principle for slowing down.
I pulled that out because in my notes, it was on like page 3 or 4. And I was like, okay, this seems like the mother quality.
It is.
In a sense that allows for the birth of all these other qualities.
You can't be busy and frenetic and bouncing off the walls with 100 projects if you're obsessed about doing something really well. It's incompatible with that. Now, doing something really well means you might have some really intense periods when you're pulling something together, but it is incompatible with being busy. Like Chris Nolan, the director, doesn't even own a smartphone. He is just, I'm making Oppenheimer.
This is a national emergency.
Detonator charged.
And that's what I'm doing for the next 3 years. And then when I'm done, I'm going to go away for 6 months and just read. That's what I do. I cannot be on YouTube, like your Daniel Day-Lewis example, because when you obsess over quality, like two things happen. One, you can't be busy because that gets in the way of actually getting really good at something. And then two, if you're doing something really well, that actually gives you the autonomy to push the other junk out of your life and slow down even more. You know, as you get better at something, the more say you get over the way your life unfolds. That's why you've been podcasting 10 years and you can say, I'm not going to do this video thing right now because you're really good at it, right? You have some autonomy to figure out how I actually want to do this. I call that principle the glue. It holds everything else together.
The glue is the quality first, competency / quality first.
Obsess over quality. Yeah, because the other two principles are do fewer things and work at a natural pace. But if you're only doing those two things, you've set up a sort of adversarial relationship with work in general. It's like, all I'm looking about is like, how do I do less? I see work. I wrote this years ago on our mutual friend, or the friend who introduced me to your work, actually, Ramit Sethi, way back when, in his early blog, I remember writing an article for him that said, don't get started. It was like my advice, because my thought was, it's really hard to get a good idea. And so like, take your time. And then to cultivate a good idea, it takes years. And you have to write, you have to, you're going to dedicate a lot of your life to it. So really don't get started if you can at all hold back until you're really, really sure about it. And then people say, yeah, but I worried that I'm just going to procrastinate forever. And in some sense, it's like, well, then maybe you're not meant to do this type of work. But the solution to that is not just, let's just go. Let's just like tweak this. Let's do this video. Let me jump over this. Let me start using generative AI, looking for, if I crypto this thing, just looking for some quick thing that you can connect. And you got to just not want to get started until you can't help but get started. I think that's frustrating for a lot of the internet generation.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
It's not that these MFA programs, which are creative writing graduate programs, they don't really teach you. It's not instructive. Like, here's how you do paragraphs, or here's techniques you didn't know, but it increases your taste, meaning your ability to recognize what's good and what's not and what's possible with good things. So that's the traditional option in sort of a pre-internet age, is you get really discerning about other people's work. You read a lot and just know this is a good novel and this is not. Or, I read a lot of New Yorker and I know what makes like a really good long form nonfiction journalist article. And then you can apply that taste to your own work and be your own worst critic. This isn't there yet. This isn't there yet. Oh, this is getting better. So you either need a way to test what you're doing, and the internet makes that easier than it was 20 years ago, and or you really have to put in the work to develop taste. So you understand what makes this good. I'm not there yet, but this is the closest thing I've done so far.
It's a pull system instead of a push system.
I mean, it's okay. Here's how many things I work on at a time. So I only pull something new in when I'm done with something, which is different than the default of anyone can push work onto your plate at any time. And it's up to you to just sort of manage this. You have an unlimited load. A pull system says, no, this is what I'm working on now. I can't do something else until I'm done with this. Now we can have a holding tank and this is where it is. Here's how I estimate when I'm going to get to it. There's this many things ahead of it. Software developers already do this because they already have Kanban inspired cards on a whiteboard system where you pull in, I'm going to work on this feature now. And over here, you have the holding tanks of features that need to be done. And when you're done with the feature you're working on, it moves to the next column and you can pull something else into its place. You could do this more with more other types of work. The idea being you don't want to be juggling too much at the same time because the overhead gets to you.
How do you do that personally?
The similar alternative to that for people in highly autonomous roles like mine as a professor writer is quota systems. So that's more what I will lean into. Break up work into the different types of things I need to do. And quota, here's how many of these I do per semester. Here's how many of these I do at a time. The idea is I still hit the different areas of stuff that is part of my responsibilities, but it's capped. So if I have a quota as a professor for here's how many paper reviews I do per semester, when I hit that cap, I can now say to someone, hey, thanks for thinking about this. I do a lot of paper reviews. I like doing paper reviews. I've already hit my quota for this semester, however, so I can't take any more on this semester. This is really effective because for someone to push back against that, they basically just have to argue your quota is wrong. Well, whatever it is wrong. You should be doing more, as opposed to saying, I'm really busy. I don't know if I have time. And they're like, everyone's busy. It'd be good for me if you would just do this.
Yeah.
Well, extreme clarity is the most important. I think people tend to focus too much in this type of situation on politeness, which is really not that important to the person making the request. They want this thing done and they want to know if you're going to do it or not. Now, you don't want to be rude, but actually clarity is the key. You can have zero wiggle room. And anyone, I'm sure you're very good at this. I mean, anyone who has a lot coming over the transom learns you have to say, I can't do this. And then you can give some explanations, but you can't give any ambiguity. So you say, unfortunately, I can't do this, because you can give some explanations. Most people don't read past the I can't do this. Like they're already emailing the next person that they're going to ask about this once they get to that line. So I think short and sweet. And
if we get too excited, we will be swinging from the chandeliers, and that's so simple as well.
Clarity is underrated in this. I mean, what do people really want? They want something done, and they also want clarity about when is this going to get done, because they want to be released from having to keep track of something in their mind. And so it's why this company that made their clients sign a communication agreement. This is how we are going to talk to you. Like, this is how we're going to discuss things. You can't just email or call us whenever. What we're going to do is we're going to have, and I believe their setup, this was a few years ago, but I believe their setup was we're going to have this weekly check-in call, and we're going to take careful notes during this check-in call of any questions you have that we don't have the answer on right away. We're going to take careful notes on that, and we'll post it and get you that information back. All right, this is what we're going to do. one of the two partners of this company was thinking, this is it, right? Like we're going out of business because clients don't want anything taken away from them. They want full flexibility. They're going to see this as weird and eccentric. And who are we to say this? The clients didn't care. They didn't care because what do clients want? If I have an issue, I need to know it's going to be taken care of. So if you have no communication agreement, what that means is, okay, I just sent you an email about this as soon as I thought about it.
Yeah, just nebulous.
Take a craft that you think is important and that you could be good at and that's interesting to you. And then you really put on your blinders for a decade. Get really good at something that's important. Everything else will work itself out. Like his exact quote was, be so good they can't ignore you. If you do that, everything else has a way of working out. That's really been my thing. I mean, the decision I made in college after I got that heart condition and I couldn't row crew anymore was, here's the two things I'm going to do. I'm going to do computer science. I'm going to write. And like, that's all I did. Like, that was it. Let me do computer science. Let me write. I don't want to do Instagram. I don't want to do Twitter. Let me just do that. I just want to get good at this. And let me read people who are really good. And I want to get better and better at this. That's where all of my energy was. Like, let me just try to do these two things as well as I can. And that's the way I think about productivity now, is how good is the best thing I've produced recently. That's it. I want to be better at things that are hard. The problem with asynchrony is that if you use it for drawn out conversations, there's going to be 7 back and forth messages for us to decide on something. This now requires me to constantly monitor whatever channel we're using here, because if we're going to get through 7 back and forth messages today because we're trying to decide on something, I have to see most of those messages, let's say within 10 or 15 minutes of it arriving, because we have to knock this ball back and forth enough times, 15 minutes per knock. We're already a couple hours into it. So now I have to be checking these inboxes all the time. But if I'm checking these inboxes all the time, I'm seeing lots of other stuff as well. Now I'm in a state, to borrow a term from Linda Stone, of partial continuous attention, which drains my energy. I can't think well. I'm exhausted and I can't produce anything deep. I can't do any really good work. So asynchrony is one of these things that looks good on paper, but as soon as you start doing back and forth planning or conversations of any type with asynchrony, it destroys everything. It is one of the most potent productivity poisons. And the thing about it is that we think it's actually making us more efficient because, oh, look, I can just press send and I don't have to go on a phone. So instead, having regular times to talk real time can actually be much more efficient. The key is not to have a separate meeting for everything you might need to discuss, because now you have a separate problem, which is your schedule is crowded. So I think the answer to all of this is just office hours. Like, this is it every day, this hour to 90 minutes. My phone is on. I have a Slack channel. My door is open, and you just punt everything to office hours. Yeah. Good question. Grab me at the next office hours you can. Yeah. We should get into that. Grab me at the next office hours you can. Oh yeah. A bunch of requests are coming in for interviews, for my book coming out. Great. Next office hours you can. Come and we'll go through them all. So you consolidate synchrony into a regular period. So you're not wasting a lot of time arranging the synchrony. I think that's a sweet spot for collaboration. Here's the heuristic maybe that ties a lot of this together, is that, at least for professional stuff, in the end, it's craft. Craft is what matters. Respecting craft, developing craft, applying craft, finding meaning in craft. Just keep watching on repeat Jiro Dreams of Sushi, right? Just go back and watch that like once a month, because the more you think about craft is where I get fulfillment, craft is where I impact the world, craft is where I gain autonomy over my professional life and can provide for the people I care about and, give interesting opportunities in my life. It all comes back down to craft. You slow down, your time frames become much longer. Psychologically, you get so much resilience. Maybe you couple that, if I'm going to add a second heuristic, is ignore the internet. It's a crazy making machine. It's just a crazy making machine. It's like, don't require random people on social media to be a regular part of your life. Don't require like metrics you have to look at on a day-to-day basis of being important. I could just feel it. Like, we do my podcast, we put the episodes on YouTube because I think, as we talked about before, video will be the future, not YouTube, but we should practice. And I have a YouTube guy and I say, you can do whatever you want to like the thumbnails and the titles. I don't know. You understand YouTube, but I don't want to know about how it's doing. I don't want to feel any impact from that algorithm. I want to do my podcast show where there is no cybernetic loop pushing back and changing what you're doing beyond these super large scales. Over the last 6 months, if we average out downloads, I think we're trending upwards, right? So maybe you put those two things together. Craft is everything. You can build a psychologically resilient, sustainable, successful professional life on craft. and ignore the internet. Do those two things. You're going to be really happy, especially if you're talented and have like a particular talent. It's all I do as a writer basically is come up with 2-word terms for things that widely exist and everyone already knows about, right? So deep work already exists. I just put a name to it. Digital minimalism. It's like, yeah, I'm just putting a name to a philosophy. So that's my whole secret is like, and I've said this before to people about pragmatic nonfiction writing. The goal is not to try to teach someone something completely new they didn't know about. The goal is just to try to help people articulate something they already know deep in their gut is true. They just don't have a framework or terminology for it. Like that's what really has an impact. It's like, yeah, I know slow productivity is better. I just didn't have a name for it or a framework. Don't try to convince people of new things. Explain to them what they already know in a way that lets them take better action. I think that's the secret to nonfiction, prescriptive nonfiction writing is you're not really teaching people something new. It's just, how do I leverage something my gut tells me is true? I just don't have my fingers around it all the way.